All right, so guys, basically, I want to tell a little personal story as a little bonus content for our audience because I think it relates very much to a subject that we talk about on this show, which is the Jordan Neely, Daniel Penny altercation on the subway. And when I was in the moment, like I was literally thinking about that situation. So I'll just cut right to it. I was in an incredibly similar situation, not on a subway, but on a street. I'm riding my bike down a road, right? And this road, clearly there's signs like share the road with cars and bikes. This is a regularly biked on road, and this car behind me just lays into their horn like and I'm like, just go around. So he comes around, he drives into oncoming and is driving beside me in oncoming with his window down, and he's yelling at me. He's like, yo, fuck you, what, why are you on a bike in a road? The road's for cars, get off your bike, get on a car. And it's like, you're wrong. I didn't know what to say to him. He's like, this is for bikes too. And he's just continuing to yell at me. And then he like speeds away, and I give him the traditional Philly goodbye of fuck you, dickhead. And that made him stop his car. And I was like,
God.
oh shit. He gets out of the car and he comes up to me and he's getting all big. And he's like, yo, you want to say that to me again, motherfucker? That whole thing. And I could tell, like, I'm looking at this guy. And for those who don't know, I train jujitsu pretty much every day. I wrestled my whole life. Like I'm pretty decent at defending myself.
He
and
teaches wrestling.
I teach wrestling. And so I'm looking at this guy, and you're always in danger whenever a violent situation happens, no matter who the guy is. But I could tell he was, pretty frail. He didn't look like he was in good health. He's a little on the older side. He definitely wasn't bigger than me. And so I was literally thinking in that moment, I could see very clearly that I decided where this could go. Yeah, he could take a swing at me at any moment, and I had to be prepared for that. But I could have egged him on, got him to fight me. I could have, I could have done what Daniel Penny did and just made the first blow, And these choices were so clear in front of me in that moment. And it made me realize like just how awful it was of what Daniel Penny did, like truly horrendous. Because if I wanted to, I could have gotten him to hit me and killed him. It could have been my decision to do so. And I would have actually had a legal right to do so if, he had attacked me, and I would have been like, oh, I felt threatened, and oh, I killed him, accidentally. I could have easily done that. And it made it so clear to me that it was a conscious decision. When you're in that situation, you can tell, especially if you are a trained Marine, how you can conduct that situation to go whichever way you want it to. And he didn't even have the decency. Like, if he wanted to fight this guy, he didn't even have the decency to get him to swing first. He just went and took him down and choked him out. He hadn't even been violent. He hadn't directly threatened Daniel Penny in any way even close to as significantly as I was directly threatened by this guy. And I could tell in that moment that there was a right thing to do and a wrong thing to do. And I don't know if you guys have ever been in a fight, in a violent altercation. I don't know if maybe that's just me, it's slowed down because I have training or what. But I know that, like, if anyone has been watching the situation, has never been in that situation, it can be pretty clear cut. Like, you can take this in one way or another, and you are morally responsible, in my opinion, for escalating violence in any situation like that, because it is a choice.
So what happened? How did it end?
I de-escalated the situation by saying, because he was yelling at me about the bike thing, and I was like, how much you want to bet? I'll bet you $1,000 right here, right now, that we walk up this road and we see a sign that says that this road is for bikes. And that made him, like, I could see in his eyes, he's like, this guy seems pretty confident about it. maybe, I wouldn't bet $1,000 on this. Maybe I'm wrong. and like, that's like what happened, right? And I think that, like, part of it is that I was confident. Like, I wasn't scared, and that he could tell. It was like, oh, this guy doesn't seem very scared right now. Maybe there's a reason I should be, and he was like, yo, you're lucky I don't kill you right now. And I was like, I'm going to jujitsu right now, man. You can come to the gym, you can sign a waiver, we can do this totally legally, if you want to. And he ended up just, skidding, but like, he drove by me as fast as he could, as close as he possibly could. And I was like, what the
Oh
fuck?
God.
But like, yeah, no, and you know, again, if you don't have the confidence to defend yourself that I do, or even if you do, like, you have to always be aware if you are in a situation like this that it could become violent, and you should be prepared for that. But that I think that there's absolutely no situation in which that gives you the either legal or moral right to initiate violence in a situation, because you just can't. Like, if you're being cornered by a couple people, and you have like mace, and you want to do that, or like, you know, you're feeling threatened by someone who's bigger and stronger than you, and like you need to get out of that situation because it could become dangerous for you, that's one thing. But when you are on a subway with a bunch of people and there's one guy acting erratically, who doesn't have any weapons on him, for as far as you can tell, like, it's very clear that you could take that in a situation, that situation, in a way that you could de-escalate it. But he didn't do that. He made the choice of violence, and he put not just, you know, Jordan Neely, not just himself, but everyone on that train in more danger. You know, because, you know, anything could happen. You could have gotten into a tussle. You could have thrown him and hit grandma, and she could have died. You know, there's like so many things that could happen once violence is initiated that don't need to happen if you just push it in the right direction. At least make an attempt to do so. And that's why, you know, I was just saying, it was so absurd to me when this whole, you know, news cycle happened, that people were defending him as a hero. You know, and I'd been in fights before, but this situation was just so clear and day. I'd never been in a fight with a stranger, like just random person on the streets, like I was in this situation. And even then, I was just like, it was so clear. Like, I can't even, like, I've said it like 20 times, but you know, it is very clear to me that Daniel Penny made the choice to harm Jordan Neely, when he didn't have to.
I think in the case of the story that you just told, your story, you had so much more justification to use violence against this person if you had chosen to go down that path. Like, people, I would not have nearly as much issue with you, like, swinging at this guy who is obviously coming at you in a very, very hostile way. Still probably not the smart thing to do, not the nonviolent thing to do. It probably is going to end in a bigger mess. But yeah, I mean, I can see the analogy, but I just think that, like, the Jordan Neely story, there was no there was no there was no justification for intervening in such a violent fashion. None whatsoever. He was literally just acting out a little bit and yelling and threw a jacket on the ground. There's nothing there that is dangerous and violent, you know? So, yeah.
No, I always, you know, we covered the story, and I saw people, you know, have their comments afterwards, kind of like on the takes that we had on the video. Basically just trying to paint Jordan Neely in that situation as somehow a threat, that he was a threat, you know. But obviously, clearly, a clear delineation between that story and this story is that in your story, you actually were threatened by a person who sought you out. In the Daniel Neely, in the Daniel Penny Jordan Neely situation, where Daniel, you know, like, takes his life, I mean, you had Jordan, who obviously is going through a mental health crisis, yelling on a train, threw something down, not directly threatening any one individual. And, you know, normally most, you know, I think adults, men, I think in particular, have been in situations over the course of their lives where they either were about to be in a violent interaction or they got into one. And we all know from being in those situations the moments that lead up to them. And so many times they can be de-escalated just by talking. Just by talking. Yes, there are some times where violence occurs and there's no talking your way out of it, but usually that's not the case. And 9 times out of 10, if you really want to avoid violence, you can. You just can. And so when I first came across this story, it seemed to me that Daniel Penny was a person who took an opportunity to be violent because the opportunity was presented to him and he felt like he had the excuse to do so. He had the excuse to be violent, so he took it. Didn't have to. No one in particular was being threatened. He sure wasn't being threatened, but he wanted to be violent and he had an out, which is why To be fair, he's now being charged with second-degree manslaughter and negligent homicide, to which I will note that he is pleading not guilty, but he is in fact indicted on those charges. So the justice system is not on his side. So yeah, John, when it comes to you here, you obviously took the path of nonviolence, and it absolutely sickens me about how many people online have actually justified the fact that Daniel Penny chose to take the route of violence and that was his rights, when it clearly just comes down to a further dehumanization of people who are experiencing mental illness. And it's something that I'm never gonna, be okay with hearing any kind of take on.
Yeah. And, I'm not saying this to get kudos. I'm not saying this to congratulate myself. And hell, you might be thinking I'm making this up right now if you're listening to this, and I have no proof of it, but I'm not. This is real. And the reason I'm talking about it is because I want to put more of these stories out there of how you should behave in these situations. So Desmond, I think that you are right. Unfortunately, it's an issue that men have, that we have violent situations happening around us a lot. Not that violence doesn't happen to women, but that men tend to be the victims of violence.
And the perpetrators.
Yes, of course. And we have to know how to deal with these situations when it comes up, because it probably will come up at some point in your life if it hasn't yet. And when that happens, you should know, and you should think about it, and you should internalize it now, that your best path to safety, as well as the best path to safety for the other person and everyone around you, is to de-escalate the situation as much as possible. Be prepared to defend yourself if you absolutely have to, but also be prepared to de-escalate, because that is what is going to get everyone home to see their families again at the end of the night.